Even the SEAL sharpshooters fell short, until she erased the enemy formation on her own. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rocky terrain of Afghanistan's Kunar province. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her rifle scope for the third time, watching the enemy compound through the crosshairs. She had been lying in the same position for 6 hours, waiting for the perfect shot that never came. 300 meters ahead, a group of Taliban fighters moved between buildings like ghosts. They knew the American forces were watching. They had learned to stay hidden, to move quickly, to never give the snipers a clean target. Maria's radio crackled softly in her ear as her spotter whispered updates about enemy movement. Behind her, the rest of Alpha Team waited in frustration. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were Navy SEALs, the best of the best. Men who had completed impossible missions in Iraq, Syria, and countless other battlefields. But today they were stuck. The enemy had positioned themselves perfectly, using women and children as human shields, making any shot too risky. Captain James Mitchell crawled up beside Maria, his face grim. "Rodriguez, we've been here all day. Command is getting impatient. They want results." Maria nodded but kept her eye on the scope. She had earned her place on this elite team through years of proving herself. While other female soldiers were kept away from combat roles, Maria had fought tooth and nail to become the first woman assigned to direct action missions with SEAL Team 6. The compound ahead housed a high-value target, a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks against American convoys. Intelligence suggested he was planning something big, something that could kill dozens of American soldiers. But getting to him seemed impossible. The building was surrounded by civilians, and the Taliban fighters moved too quickly between cover points. Maria's finger rested lightly on the trigger as another figure appeared in her scope. For a split second, she had a clear shot at one of the guards, but before she could fire, he disappeared behind a wall. This had been happening all morning. Quick glimpses, partial targets, shots that were too risky to take. Sergeant Mike Torres, one of the team's most experienced snipers, had already tried and failed twice. His shots had hit concrete walls instead of targets, alerting the enemy to their presence. Now the Taliban fighters were being even more careful, using mirrors to check corners and moving in unpredictable patterns. The mission was supposed to be simple: get in position, eliminate the target, and extract before enemy reinforcements arrived. But nothing about this felt simple. The enemy seemed to know their every move, anticipating their tactics and countering them effectively. Maria wiped sweat from her forehead and adjusted her position slightly. Her legs were cramping from staying motionless for so long, but she couldn't risk giving away their location. Through her scope, she watched as more fighters appeared on the compound's rooftops. They were getting ready for something. The radio buzzed with urgent chatter from command. Drone surveillance had detected enemy vehicles approaching from the north. If Alpha Team didn't complete their mission soon, they would be surrounded and outnumbered. The window of opportunity was closing fast. Captain Mitchell made a decision that would change everything. Instead of retreating or calling for backup, he decided to trust his newest team member. Maria had consistently outperformed every other sniper in training. Her accuracy scores were perfect, and her ability to remain calm under pressure was legendary among instructors. "Rodriguez," the captain whispered, "I'm giving you full authority. Take whatever shots you can get. We need to break this deadlock before those reinforcements arrive." Maria felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The lives of her team members depended on her ability to do what the others couldn't. She took a deep breath and began studying the compound with fresh eyes. Instead of looking for perfect shots that might never come, she started analyzing patterns. How did the enemy move? When did they feel safe enough to expose themselves? What weaknesses could she exploit? The answer came to her gradually. The Taliban fighters were using a rotation system, changing positions every few minutes to avoid being targeted. But rotations meant movement, and movement meant opportunity. She just had to be faster and more precise than anyone expected. As enemy vehicles appeared on the horizon, Maria prepared to attempt something that had never been tried before. She was about to prove that sometimes the impossible just needed a different approach. The mission that had stalled for hours was about to change dramatically, and Maria Rodriguez was ready to show why she had earned her place among America's elite warriors. The convoy of enemy reinforcements was still 20 minutes away, but Maria could feel time slipping through her fingers like sand. She had to act now or risk losing her entire team. The Taliban fighters in the compound had become even more cautious after the earlier failed shots, making her job nearly impossible. Through her scope, Maria watched as children played in the courtyard below the target building. The enemy commander was using them as protection, knowing that American forces would never risk harming civilians. It was a cruel but effective strategy that had worked against previous assault teams. Sergeant Torres crawled over to Maria's position, his face showing the strain of the failed mission. "I've been doing this for 12 years, he whispered. "I've never seen a setup this tight. Maybe we should call for an airstrike and get out of here." Maria shook her head. An airstrike would kill everyone in the compound, including innocent people. That wasn't why she had joined the military. Captain Mitchell was on the radio with headquarters explaining their situation to increasingly frustrated commanders. "Sir, we have eyes on the target, but he's using human shields. Every shot we've attempted has been blocked or deflected. The enemy knows our position and they're playing defense perfectly." The response from command was clear: complete the mission or face serious consequences. The target was too valuable to let escape, and intelligence suggested he was planning an attack on a nearby American base within hours. Failure wasn't an option, but success seemed impossible. Maria studied the compound's layout again, memorizing every building, every window, every possible hiding spot. The main target building was 3 stories tall with narrow windows and thick walls. The Taliban commander had been spotted on the 2nd floor, but he never stayed in one place for more than a few seconds. What made the situation even more difficult was the weather. Wind patterns in the mountains were unpredictable, affecting bullet trajectory in ways that even experienced snipers struggled to compensate for. Maria had to account for wind speed, distance, elevation, and the movement of her targets, all while remaining hidden from enemy spotters. The other team members were growing restless. These were men accustomed to action, to moving fast and striking hard. Lying still for hours while watching their target slip away went against every instinct they had developed through years of combat experience. Private Jackson, the team's youngest member, crawled up to Maria with a question that had been bothering everyone. "Sergeant, what makes you think you can succeed where the rest of us have failed?" "No offense, but Torres has more experience, and Williams has more confirmed kills." Maria smiled slightly without taking her eye off the scope. "Experience and kill counts don't matter if you're thinking about the problem wrong," she replied softly. "Everyone's been trying to get one perfect shot. But what if perfect shots don't exist in this situation? What if we need to create our own opportunities instead of waiting for them?" Through her scope, Maria noticed something the others had missed. The Taliban fighters weren't just moving randomly. They were following specific routes between buildings, probably paths they had practiced to avoid sniper fire. If she could predict their movement patterns, she might be able to anticipate where they would be instead of reacting to where they were. The enemy reinforcements were getting closer. Dust clouds on the horizon marked their approach, and radio intercepts suggested they were heavily armed and ready for a fight. Once they arrived, Alpha Team would be outnumbered 10-1 with no easy escape route. Captain Mitchell made another attempt to contact command for additional support, but the response was the same. No backup was available, no airstrike was authorized, and the mission parameters hadn't changed. They had to eliminate the target using ground forces, and they had to do it before enemy reinforcements arrived. Maria began making calculations in her head, factoring in wind speed, bullet drop, and target movement patterns. She had always been good at mathematics, a skill that translated perfectly to precision shooting. While other snipers relied on instinct and experience, Maria used numbers and probability to improve her accuracy. The breakthrough came when she realized that the enemy's defensive strategy had a fatal weakness. They were so focused on avoiding direct shots that they had created predictable patterns. Every few minutes, the same fighters appeared in the same windows, checking the same corners, following the same routes. "Captain," Maria whispered into her radio, "I need everyone to trust me for the next 5 minutes. I'm going to try something that's never been attempted before. It's going to look crazy and it might not work, but it's our only chance." Captain Mitchell hesitated. Maria was talented, but she was also the newest member of the team. Could he really bet all their lives on an untested strategy from someone with limited combat experience? The sound of approaching vehicles made his decision easier. "You have my authorization, Rodriguez. Do whatever you think is necessary." Maria felt a surge of adrenaline as she prepared to attempt something that would either save her team or get them all killed. The impossible shot she was planning would require perfect timing, incredible accuracy, and a level of skill that even she wasn't sure she possessed. As the enemy reinforcements crested the hill, Maria began her assault on the compound. What happened next would become legend among Special Forces units, but for Maria, it was simply about using everything she had learned to protect the people who had trusted her with their lives. Maria's plan was unlike anything her teammates had ever heard. Instead of waiting for individual targets to expose themselves, she intended to force the entire enemy formation to react simultaneously, creating multiple opportunities in a matter of seconds. It was audacious, dangerous, and possibly suicidal. "Listen carefully," she whispered to her team through the radio. "The enemy is using a rotation system. Every 4 minutes, they change positions. But during those changes, there's a 15-second window when multiple targets are exposed. I'm going to create noise and confusion to disrupt their timing, then engage multiple targets before they can reorganize." Captain Mitchell frowned. "Rodriguez, that's not how sniping works. You can't engage multiple targets simultaneously. Even if you could, you'd give away our position to everyone in that compound." Maria nodded, acknowledging the risk. But conventional tactics had already failed, and time was running out. She had studied the compound's architecture carefully during their long wait. The buildings were old, with thick walls but relatively thin roofs. The Taliban fighters felt safe inside, but they had to expose themselves when moving between buildings. Maria's plan was to make them move all at once, creating chaos that she could exploit. "Torres, I need you to put a round through that water tank on the north building. Not to hit anyone, just to create noise and panic. Williams, fire at the satellite dish on the south roof. Make them think we're attacking from multiple directions." The two snipers looked at each other uncertainly. "Sergeant, that will reveal our positions to the enemy." "They'll know exactly where we are," Torres protested. Maria smiled grimly. "They already know where we are. They've been watching us for hours. The difference is that now we're going to make them react instead of just watching." Private Jackson was monitoring enemy communications through intercepted radio traffic. "The reinforcements are 5 minutes out, Sergeant. Their convoy commander is coordinating with the fighters in the compound. They're planning to surround our position and force us into a crossfire." Maria felt the pressure mounting, but her mind remained clear. She had always performed better under stress, a trait that had helped her excel in training. While others panicked or rushed their shots, Maria became calmer and more focused as the stakes increased. "Here's what's going to happen," she continued. "When Torres and Williams fire their distraction shots, the enemy will think we're beginning a full assault. They'll move to defensive positions, but they'll all move at the same time. That's when I take my shots." The plan required perfect timing and incredible accuracy. Maria would have approximately 12 seconds to engage multiple targets before the enemy realized what was happening and took cover. She would need to fire, acquire a new target, fire again, and repeat the process faster than anyone thought possible. Captain Mitchell was still skeptical. "Even if you could fire that quickly, how do you know where the targets will be? They could move to any number of positions." Maria pointed to her notebook where she had been tracking enemy movement patterns for hours. "They're not moving randomly, sir. Look at these patterns. Guard 1 always goes to the northeast window. Guard 2 always checks the stairwell. The commander moves to the second-floor center room. They've practiced these movements so many times they're automatic." What Maria didn't tell her team was that her plan relied on more than just pattern recognition. She had been calculating wind speeds, bullet trajectories, and timing sequences in her head for the past hour. She knew exactly when to fire each shot to account for target movement and environmental factors. The sound of enemy vehicles grew louder. Through binoculars, Captain Mitchell could see armed fighters dismounting from trucks and taking positions around the compound. In minutes, Alpha Team would be completely surrounded with no escape route. "All right, Rodriguez," the captain said finally. "We'll try your plan. But if it doesn't work, we extract immediately. I won't sacrifice this team for one target, no matter how valuable." Maria nodded, understanding that she had one chance to prove herself. She began preparing her rifle for rapid fire, adjusting her scope settings and checking her ammunition. Unlike her teammates who carried standard military rifles, Maria's weapon was customized for precision shooting. She had modified the trigger, improved the barrel, and calibrated the scope personally. "Torres, Williams on my mark. Fire your distraction shots. Jackson, monitor enemy communications and warn me if they realize what we're doing. Captain, be ready to call for immediate extraction if this goes wrong. Each team member acknowledged their role in the risky plan. Maria positioned herself for maximum stability and visibility. She would need to engage targets on multiple levels of the compound, requiring her to adjust her aim quickly while maintaining accuracy. Her shooting position had to accommodate rapid movement between targets without compromising her concealment. Through her scope, she watched the compound one final time, memorizing the exact locations where she expected targets to appear. She had mapped out her shooting sequence, identifying the order in which she would engage each target to maximize her chances of success. The enemy reinforcements were now close enough that she could hear their engines clearly. Radio chatter indicated they were coordinating with the fighters in the compound, preparing to launch a coordinated attack on Alpha Team's position. It was now or never. Execute in 10 seconds, Maria whispered. Her heart rate slowed as she entered the focused state that had made her the best marksman in her training class. Everything else faded away except for her targets and the mathematics of precision shooting. The impossible mission was about to become reality. Execute now, Maria whispered into her radio. The first distraction shots rang out simultaneously as Torres and Williams fired at their designated targets. The water tank exploded in a shower of metal and water, while the satellite dish collapsed in a crash of twisted metal. The compound erupted into chaos exactly as Maria had predicted. She watched through her scope as enemy fighters poured from buildings, moving to predetermined defensive positions. But instead of random panic, their movements followed the patterns she had memorized. Guard 1 appeared in the northeast window just as she had calculated. Guard 2 emerged from the stairwell precisely on schedule. Maria's first shot took down the fighter in the northeast window before he could even raise his weapon. Without pausing to confirm the hit, she swiveled her rifle toward the stairwell entrance. Her second shot caught Guard 2 as he stepped into the doorway, exactly where her calculations had predicted he would be. The Taliban fighters were still reacting to the initial distraction shots. Unaware that their formation was being systematically destroyed, Maria's third shot eliminated a rooftop spotter who had exposed himself to get a better view of the American positions. Each shot was fired with mechanical precision, the result of hours of mental preparation and mathematical calculation. Through her earpiece, she could hear confused shouting from the enemy radio communications that Jackson was monitoring. They knew they were under attack, but they couldn't identify where the deadly accurate fire was coming from. The distraction shots had worked perfectly, masking Maria's location and intentions. Her fourth shot was the most difficult. The Taliban commander had appeared at a second-floor window, but he was moving quickly and would only be visible for 2 seconds. Maria had to account for his movement, the wind speed and the slightly upward angle of the shot. She fired just as he reached the center of the window frame. The shot struck the commander's center mass, eliminating the primary target that had been causing problems for weeks. But Maria wasn't finished. She had identified 6 more fighters who posed immediate threats to her team, and she intended to neutralize all of them before they could reorganize their defenses. Her 5th and 6th shots came in rapid succession, taking down 2 fighters who were attempting to set up a machine gun position on the compound's main roof. Without that weapon, the enemy couldn't pin down Alpha Team during their eventual extraction. Every shot Maria fired was strategic, designed to eliminate specific threats in a predetermined order. The entire engagement lasted less than 30 seconds, but in that time, Maria had fundamentally changed the tactical situation. What had been an impossible mission against a well-fortified enemy position had become a successful elimination of key targets. The compound's defensive formation was broken, its leadership eliminated, and its remaining fighters were in disarray. Captain Mitchell watched in amazement as his newest team member accomplished what 3 experienced snipers had failed to do all day. Rodriguez, that was impossible. How did you know exactly where they would be? Maria's voice remained calm and professional as she continued scanning for additional targets. Mathematics, sir. I calculated their movement patterns and timing sequences. Once I forced them to react simultaneously, they became predictable. She paused to take another shot at a fighter attempting to flee the compound. 7 down, 3 more visible targets remaining. The enemy reinforcements were now arriving at the compound, but instead of finding their allies in defensive positions, They discovered chaos and confusion. Their radio communications revealed panic as they tried to understand how their carefully planned ambush had been turned against them. Private Jackson, still monitoring enemy communications, provided updates on the reinforcement unit's movements. They're spreading out to search for our positions, but they're being cautious. The accuracy of those shots has them spooked. They think they're facing a much larger force. Maria used this psychological advantage to further disrupt the enemy formation. Her 8th shot eliminated a reinforcement fighter who was attempting to coordinate a search pattern. Her 9th shot forced the others to take cover, buying Alpha Team precious time to begin their extraction. But the most impressive aspect of Maria's performance wasn't just her accuracy or speed. It was her ability to think strategically while executing tactically. Each shot served multiple purposes, eliminating threats, creating psychological pressure, and shaping the battlefield to favor her team's escape. Sergeant Torres, who had initially doubted Maria's unconventional plan, was now providing cover fire to support her systematic destruction of the enemy formation. "I've never seen shooting like that," he radioed. "It's like she could see the future." Williams was equally impressed. The shots weren't just accurate, they were smart. She eliminated their leadership, their heavy weapons, and their coordination all in the right sequence. This wasn't just good shooting, this was tactical genius. Maria's final shots targeted specific fighters who were attempting to organize the surviving enemy forces. By eliminating these potential leaders, she ensured that the remaining fighters would remain disorganized and ineffective. The compound that had been an impregnable fortress was now a collection of scattered, frightened individuals. As the immediate threat diminished, Maria began preparing for the team's extraction. She had accomplished the impossible, but the mission wasn't complete until everyone made it home safely. The enemy reinforcements were still dangerous, and they would soon realize that they were facing a much smaller force than they had initially believed. Captain Mitchell was already coordinating with extraction helicopters, but they were still 15 minutes away. Maria would need to continue providing overwatch protection while her team moved to the pickup zone. The hardest part of the mission was complete, but the most dangerous phase was just beginning. The extraction helicopters were still 12 minutes away when the enemy reinforcements began to understand what had really happened. Maria could hear their radio chatter changing from confusion to anger as they realized they had been outmaneuvered by a much smaller force. The psychological advantage she had created was beginning to wear off. "Alpha Team, we need to move to the extraction point now," Captain Mitchell ordered. The team began their careful withdrawal from their overwatch position, but Maria remained in place to provide covering fire. Someone had to watch their backs while they moved across open ground to reach the helicopter landing zone. Through her scope, Maria observed enemy fighters regrouping around the compound. They were no longer the disciplined formation she had faced earlier, but desperate and angry fighters could be just as dangerous. Some were attempting to track Alpha Team's movement, while others were setting up positions to ambush the extraction helicopters. Her next series of shots had a different purpose than the initial assault. Instead of eliminating specific targets, she was now using precision fire to control enemy movement and buy time for her team's escape. A shot near one group of fighters forced them to take cover. Another shot discouraged a different group from advancing toward the extraction zone. "Rodriguez, you need to start moving," Torres radioed. "We can't extract without you, and those helicopters won't wait around if the landing zone is hot." Maria understood the urgency, but she also knew that her team would be vulnerable during their movement to the pickup point. The enemy had brought vehicles, which meant they could potentially chase down Alpha Team before the helicopters arrived. Maria identified the most dangerous vehicle, a technical truck mounted with a heavy machine gun, and put 3 precisely placed shots through its engine block. The truck died in a cloud of steam and smoke, eliminating a major threat. But neutralizing one vehicle only made the others more cautious. The remaining enemy fighters began using buildings and terrain features to mask their movements, making it harder for Maria to track them. She had to make a decision: continue providing overwatch or begin her own movement to the extraction point. Captain Mitchell made the decision for her. "Rodriguez, move now. That's an order. We'll provide covering fire for each other during movement." Maria reluctantly began packing her equipment while maintaining visual contact with the most dangerous enemy positions. The withdrawal across open ground was the most vulnerable part of any mission. Maria's teammates had to cross nearly 800 meters of rocky terrain, while potentially under fire from multiple directions. She moved in bounds, stopping every few hundred meters to provide covering fire while the others advanced. During one of these covering positions, Maria spotted enemy fighters attempting to flank Alpha Team's route. They were moving through a drainage ditch that would put them in position to ambush her teammates. She had to act quickly but carefully, since her own team was now between her and the enemy. Her shots had to be perfectly placed to avoid hitting her own people while eliminating the flanking threat. Maria calculated angles and trajectories in her head while tracking multiple moving targets. Her first shot stopped the lead flanker. Her second shot forced the others to retreat back into the ditch. Contact left about 400 meters, she radioed to her team. 3 enemy fighters attempting to flank our route. Threat neutralized, continue movement. Captain Mitchell acknowledged while directing his team toward better cover positions. The helicopter engines became audible in the distance, but Maria knew that landing zone security was critical. Enemy fighters with portable anti-aircraft missiles could potentially shoot down the extraction birds, killing everyone aboard. She had to identify and neutralize any remaining threats before the helicopters arrived. Through her scope, she spotted a fighter carrying what appeared to be a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. He was positioning himself to engage the incoming helicopters from a concealed location behind the compound's outer wall. Maria's shot eliminated him before he could acquire a target. The extraction helicopters appeared over the ridge, flying low and fast to minimize their exposure time. But Maria noticed enemy movement on a nearby rooftop, fighters with what looked like surface-to-air missiles. She had perhaps 10 seconds to prevent a catastrophic attack on the rescue birds. Her shots came in rapid succession, eliminating the missile team before they could lock onto the helicopters. The aircraft continued their approach, unaware of how close they had come to being shot down. Maria's vigilance had saved not only her own team but also the helicopter crews. "Alpha Team, this is Rescue 1, came the voice of the lead pilot. "Landing zone appears secure. We're coming in hot for immediate extraction. Be ready to move fast." The helicopters descended rapidly toward the designated pickup point. Maria was the last member of Alpha Team to reach the landing zone. As she sprinted across the final stretch of open ground, enemy fighters emerged from the compound, firing desperately at the escaping Americans. Her teammates provided covering fire from inside the helicopters while she made her final dash to safety. She dove into the helicopter just as the pilot pulled collective, lifting off under fire from multiple enemy positions. Bullets struck the aircraft's armor plating, but none penetrated to the passenger compartment. Within seconds, they were climbing rapidly away from the compound and the angry fighters below. As the landscape fell away beneath them, Maria finally allowed herself to relax. The impossible mission was complete. The high-value target was eliminated, her entire team was alive and uninjured, and the enemy formation that had seemed impregnable was broken and scattered. Captain Mitchell looked at his newest team member with newfound respect. "Rodriguez, what you did back there will be talked about for years. You didn't just complete an impossible mission, you redefined what we thought was possible." But for Maria, the greatest satisfaction came from knowing that she had brought her entire team home safely. 3 weeks later, Maria Rodriguez sat in a briefing room at Joint Special Operations Command headquarters, surrounded by senior military officials who still couldn't quite believe what they had witnessed. The mission footage from drone surveillance and helmet cameras had been analyzed frame by frame, and the consensus was unanimous. What she had accomplished was theoretically impossible. "Sergeant Rodriguez," the briefing officer began, "your actions during Operation Highland Thunder represent a fundamental breakthrough in precision shooting techniques. In 30 seconds, you eliminated 9 enemy combatants, neutralized their defensive formation, and turned an impossible mission into a complete success." The room contained some of the military's most experienced special operations commanders, men who had seen decades of combat and thought they understood the limits of human capability. Maria's performance had forced them to reconsider everything they believed about individual soldiers and their potential impact on complex operations. General Harrison, the commander of Special Operations Command, reviewed the mission statistics one more time. "Rodriguez, your shooting accuracy was perfect. 9 shots, 9 hits at ranges from 200 to 400 meters under combat stress, with moving targets. But what's more impressive is the tactical thinking behind each shot. The analysis showed that Maria hadn't just been shooting accurately, She had been conducting a complex tactical operation single-handedly. Each shot had been calculated not just for accuracy, but for its strategic impact on the enemy's ability to fight effectively. She had systematically dismantled their command structure, heavy weapons capability, and coordination. Captain Mitchell was also present for the debrief, having been asked to provide his assessment of Maria's performance. "Sir, I've worked with some of the best snipers in the world, and I've never seen anything like what Rodriguez did. It wasn't just the shooting, it was the way she analyzed the entire tactical situation and developed a solution that none of us could see." The mission had broader implications for special operations doctrine. Military strategists were already studying Maria's techniques to understand how they could be applied to similar situations. Her use of mathematical calculations for predicting enemy movement patterns was being incorporated into sniper training programs across all branches of the military. But the recognition went beyond military circles. Maria's story had reached the highest levels of government, and she was scheduled to receive the Silver Star for her extraordinary heroism under fire. The citation would read that her actions had saved the lives of her entire team while accomplishing a mission that had been deemed impossible by conventional standards. The psychological impact on enemy forces was also significant. Intelligence reports indicated that Taliban commanders were changing their tactics specifically because of what had happened at the compound. They no longer believed that superior numbers and defensive positions guaranteed safety against American special operations teams. Private Jackson, who had monitored enemy communications during the mission, was asked to provide his assessment of the psychological warfare aspects of Maria's shooting. "Sir, the enemy radio traffic after the engagement showed complete confusion and fear. They couldn't understand how their defensive positions had been compromised so quickly and accurately." The success had opened new opportunities for Maria within the special operations community. Multiple elite units were requesting her transfer, hoping to benefit from her unique combination of mathematical precision and tactical innovation. But Maria had already decided to remain with Alpha Team, feeling a strong loyalty to the men who had trusted her with their lives. Training programs were being developed based on Maria's methods, combining advanced mathematics with precision shooting techniques. Her approach of using pattern analysis and probability calculations to predict enemy behavior was being studied by military academicians and field commanders alike. The broader impact extended to military policy regarding women in combat roles. Maria's performance had demonstrated conclusively that gender was irrelevant when it came to tactical effectiveness and leadership under pressure. Her success was opening doors for other women to join previously all-male special operations units. 6 months after the mission, Maria was promoted to staff sergeant and assigned as a marksmanship instructor for special operations candidates. Her first class included several male soldiers who had initially questioned whether a woman could teach them anything about combat shooting. That skepticism disappeared quickly during the first training exercise. The key to impossible shots, Maria would tell her students, isn't just practice and talent. It's understanding that every tactical situation has mathematical solutions if you're smart enough to find them. Don't just react to what you see, predict what you're going to see next. Her teaching methods revolutionized sniper training, emphasizing analytical thinking alongside traditional marksmanship skills. Students learned to calculate probability matrices for enemy movement patterns and to use environmental factors as tactical advantages rather than obstacles to overcome. Years later, when military historians wrote about the evolution of special operations tactics, Operation Highland Thunder would be recognized as a turning point. It was the mission that proved individual excellence could overcome seemingly impossible odds. And that innovation often came from the most unexpected sources. Maria Rodriguez had entered that briefing room as a soldier who had completed a difficult mission. She left as a legend whose techniques would influence military operations for generations to come. The impossible shot had become the foundation for a new understanding of what individual warriors could accomplish when they combined courage, skill, and intelligence in perfect harmony. Her story would be told in military academies around the world, inspiring countless soldiers to push beyond conventional limitations and redefine what was possible on the modern battlefield. The SEAL sharpshooters who had initially doubted her abilities would spend the rest of their careers trying to match the standard she had set during those crucial 30 seconds in Afghanistan.